You know, this year has been eerily similar to me to 1994. Republican standard bearer who steps aside at the end of the election, a well-funded Democrat office holder with a large war chest and a compressed period of time in which to campaign. That was the situation that I volunteered for in 1994, and some of you that are here that joined me in that fray. And we worked very hard. We rolled up our sleeves. We made some tremendous progress here in the 9th District, and we came a little short. But then through your efforts, we came back again, and we were able to make history just by the election. And then we really made history by being reelected. The first Republican ever reelected. And I see some former candidates here as well who tried to get over the top. This is what I think where our state is. I think Matt doesn't give himself, the governor doesn't give himself enough credit, because when you think about what he inherited, I mean, leadership is really about taking a stand even in the face of unpopularity. That's what George W. Bush has done. He stayed the course on something that he believed so passionately about. And so when the governor says, I mean, we toss around these terms, and certainly he did, he inherited a budget that was $1 billion in the red. And of course, it wasn't just the governor, but it was some of those that are here tonight who've represented our state, that they rolled up their sleeves and they made some very tough choices. They've been very critically talked about and written about because of those choices. But the fact is, because of their efforts, because they stood up and recognized that they had to do something, we have this budget surplus in 3 short years without having to go into our wallets and take more money from us. I think that's extraordinary, and I salute them. I mean, again, to underscore what the governor said, we had tens of thousands of jobs that were fleeing the state of Missouri. There were reasons why people were looking to other states. We had created, over the course of 12 years of the other side running this state, we had created an unfriendly business climate such that it was more attractive and more profitable to do business in one of the states that surrounded us. And so those folks that we sent to Jefferson City said, you know, let's change the way that we have workers' compensation. Let's make sure that we don't have doctors leaving. Even though many of them still live across the state line road in Kansas, but still practice in the state of Missouri, because malpractice insurance premiums still are lower in Kansas, but nonetheless, reining in those out-of-control lawsuits. Once again, rolling out the welcome mat so businesses would look again to the work ethic of our people. And the fact that, you know, that those of us here in Missouri, that we want to build a better state, a better economy, not just jobs, but careers here. I mean, that's the Missouri dream. And so all of these changes that they were able to accomplish, and yes, Mr. Steinhoff, I'll give you some grudging support, you know, and having the vision to try to recruit some of these unique economic development opportunities, all those things. And so we went from 30,000 jobs lost to over 90,000 jobs. I think, if memory serves, that more Missourians are working now than ever in the history of our state under this governor and these folks. And I think we deserve... But here's the challenge. Sean Hannity said, what, 242 days. I think now that we're this close to midnight, we're going to have to cross that one off. So tomorrow morning when we wake up, it's going to be 241 days until November the 4th. When I think of it in that term, it's a daunting challenge, and yet we focus every single day with that same single-mindedness and that same focus that has driven me. And of course, many of you know, when you mention the name Blunt, you think of politics. When you think of Carnahan, the name Carnahan, the family Carnahan, you think of politics. At the federal level, when you say the words Kennedy, when you hear Bush, Clinton, you think of politics. In southern Missouri, in fact, Notre Dame High School is here because they're playing for the state championship tomorrow in basketball, and they're from down in the Boot Heel. Down in the Boot Heel, when you say the name Hulshof, you think farmers. And I say that proudly. Because when my mom and dad in 1956 left deep in the boot heel with $1,000 in their pocket, that was their stake in life, and they were going to try to make their way in the world. And I'm sure as a young 22-year-old, my father and his new bride, you know, they had faith in themselves, they had faith in God, they had love for each other, love for the land. And they knew that whatever wasn't in their bank accounts they could make up for with hard work and sweat equity, but still probably some anxiety or fear deep down. And yet they clung to each other, they bought a little piece of property, and then they began to make their way in the world. And when their only son was born 2 years later, they instilled in him the same values that made them successful. And those values are simple. They're timeless. A strong work ethic and faith. And the fact that you can shake someone's hand and that's good enough for a business deal. And the wisest man I knew, my father, even though he never finished college, said, the only thing worth keeping in life is keeping your good name. And it doesn't matter if you are on the radio, it doesn't matter if you're in healthcare, if you're in public office, if you're retired in the military. That is a mantra that all of us can live by. The only thing worth keeping in life is keeping your good name. And it's been something that has motivated me and driven me every single day, whether I was taking my trial briefcase to the 50 counties here in Missouri to try to put bad guys away, to the 12 years now that you've allowed me to represent you and be your voice in Washington, D.C. It's the same passion that I'm bringing to this role, this opportunity as governor. To think again that my parents, I wish they could see this moment, although I'm sure my mom would be quite anxious because, when I told her in 1994, Dina knows this, I said to my mom, I said, Mom, I've been selected to be the replacement candidate to run for Congress. And the first thing she said was, you're too nice for politics. And the second thing she said was because deep in the boot heel, the yellow dog Democrat country, I'd rather vote for a yellow dog than a Republican. And so the second thing my mom said was, whose kid are you? As a Republican? What? But I think, I finally got Mom over on our side of the aisle eventually, and, Dad was beaming, so I guess they sort of canceled each other's votes out. But the point being that this is our time. I mean, this is our moment. You have helped prepare me for this moment. And we have a tremendous challenge and task ahead of us. We have a great story to tell. The governor, of course, a Navy guy. I was a Boy Scout. But the fact is that you leave the campground in better shape than you found it, and he has done that with those leaders in Jefferson City. We've got some challenges. We have health care. How do we make sure that we have a health safety net for those of our state's most vulnerable? How do we make sure that the higher education here in our state, we aren't just competing against the University of Kansas, we're competing against the University of Korea and Kyoto and India. How do we make sure that those jobs that are being created aren't just jobs for temporary, but in fact are jobs for a career? And education, of course, and the other final thing I would say, because as education, I heard him talking about education, the first thing that came to my mind was the fight over Mohila. And the fact is that, unfortunately in Jefferson City, it seems as it becomes a little more like Washington, D.C., that you reject something, at least some people in Jeff City will reject an idea just because it came from the other side of the political aisle. And certainly that's been the case, and God bless those of you who've had to fight the fight, especially in this area, who've had to try to take that fight and to try to do what's right. I think it's time for a fresh perspective in Jefferson City. I don't have any axes to grind. I don't have any scores to settle. I just got a lot of work to do to roll up my sleeves, if you'll let me. So, amen, whoever that was. Was that you, Renee? No.